Hi, good evening, everyone. Hopefully everyone can hear me okay, and you're able to see the screen. My name is Christy Cruss. I'm the manager of creative communities for the town of Whitby, and I wanted to welcome you all here this evening to partake and listen in as part of the Downtown Whitby Brock Street Redesign study. This is a virtual open house, and it's the first of a couple of scheduled public meetings that we're going to be having on this important topic, and we're really excited for your input and your feedback tonight. So I do want to introduce our panelists here tonight. We have ACOM is our consultant that is working on this study with us. And we have Sarah Taylor, who is our project lead. She is a landscape and urban design specialist with ACOM. We also have Nair Dahar. He is our traffic and transportation specialist with ACOM. We have Tracy McKenna, who is our engagement specialist with ACOM, and she'll be kind of managing the behind the scenes chat. And if there's any questions or issues that you're having, you can message her. And then we also have Tara Pancho, who is the senior manager of our transportation team at the town. So all of us are here tonight to help assist you, answer questions, and provide you information with regard to this study. Next slide, please. So I do want to do our land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that the corporation of the town of Whitby is located on the lands of the Great Mississauga Nations, who are signatories to the Williams Treaty. These communities include the Mississaugas of Scugog Island, First Nations of Alderville, Beausoleil, Curve Lake, Hiawatha, Chippewas of Georgina Island, and Rama. We believe it is important that we learn and work to reconcile the impact we, and those before us, have on the original inhabitants. On behalf of the town of Whitby, we want to thank them for sharing this land and all its resources. At the town of Whitby, our goal is to respectfully share in the responsibility of the stewardship and protection of these ancestral lands and waters and continue towards truth and reconciliation as we move forward as friends and allies with all the First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. I'm going to pass it over to Tracy, and she's going to do a little bit of the housekeeping items for this evening.
Thank you, everyone. For tonight's session, we'll be using Zoom webinar. So you will notice that you've been muted. To participate in tonight's session, there is a question and answer function built within the Zoom platform at the bottom. If you're having any technological challenges, please message us through that and we'll do our best to assist you. Also, any project-related comments or feedback we receive will be addressed either later during the question and answer period or intermittently, as we will have some polls and interactive sessions during the presentation. And then following this, we'll have a question and answer period where we hope to address some of your concerns and questions.
Great, thank you, Tracy. So in terms of the background information as to kind of why we're all here tonight, the Downtown Whitby Brock Street Redesign study is really helping us develop and create an overall vision and high-level concept design that we can then use to support a welcoming, safe, accessible, and an inclusive space along Brock Street. The design will consider pedestrians, cyclists, vehicles, businesses, and the communities. And this was a study that came out as a direct action from the Downtown Whitby Action Plan that was developed a number of years ago. I'm going to pass it over to Sarah, who's going to speak a little bit about the study area.
Hi, thanks. So the study area is the Brock Street corridor, including from the Highway 401 at the south, which is at the right-hand side of the screen, extending all the way north to the CP rail corridor. As the study area is quite long, it's approximately 2.5 kilometers, we've divided the area into 5 zones based primarily on land use and traffic patterns. So starting from the south, Zone 1 extends from Highway 401 up to Burn Street. Zone 2 is from Burn Street up to Gilbert. Zone 3 would be from Gilbert Street to Dundas Street, and Zone 4, Dundas Street to Mary Street. And then Zone 5 is Mary Street up to the CP rail corridor. Next slide, please. So the project will be focusing on streetscape elements that are located between the property lines under municipal ownership or within the municipal right-of-way. This image shows a typical section of the existing conditions on Brock Street within the downtown area and illustrates some typical components of a streetscape. So that includes the roadway, on-street parking areas, sidewalk areas, and what's called the amenity zone, which is the space between the curb and the sidewalk. And that would be where things like street lighting, trees, and other types of planting, street furniture, any decorative paving would be located. Next slide, please. So the timeline for the project will be divided into 3 phases. Phase 1 is the concept design, which began in the fall 2023 with our background study and existing conditions review. We're currently here at the first public engagement stage in April. And so we'll be using the feedback we hear from this engagement and to develop the concept design alternatives over the summer. And then in the fall, we will present those concepts back at our second public engagement stage. And then we'll be using that feedback to finalize the concept and recommendations, which we will present to council in winter 2025. That will take us to phase 2, which is detailed design. So the town will take the approved concept design and use that to develop detailed designs that will form the basis of the construction drawings and documents, taking us to phase 3, which is construction and installation, which is anticipated to occur in 2026.
So the project does have a number of different considerations and recommendations that were already identified through some background documents and research. So some of those background documents include things like the Downtown Whitby Secondary Plan, which involves the overarching policies for Downtown Whitby. So that includes things such as heights, land uses, setbacks. We also have the transportation study as well as a parking study that was done within the last few years that has helped provide some input into some of the recommendations that we're going to be, some of the considerations that we're looking at tonight. And we've also had studies like the gateway study. So the gateways into and out of downtown Whitby, and those have been identified through a study and how we can help enhance those spaces as we come into our historic commercial core. So out of that, there was a number of different elements through those studies that had been already considered, and they include things such as pedestrian safety, traffic calming measures, sidewalk improvements, street furniture elements such as bicycle racks and benches, green spaces and areas, historical features, event spaces, transit and transportation, and then parking. So we do have our first poll that we are going to bring up now. And we are asking you to respond. We'll give everyone maybe about 30 seconds to a minute here. If you're able to highlight and click on which of the following topics are you most interested in. And we're asking you, if you can, to select your top 3. We'll just give this a little bit of time so everyone has a chance. This is the first poll that we have up tonight. So hopefully if you have any issues, please put a note in the chat and we're happy to help you through the polling. If there is any comments or questions, I see one coming in through the Q&A. So you can use the Q&A if you are having any concerns. Sorry, the chat. My apologies, the chat is disabled, but the question and answer is able to be activated. Thank you for that note, Stephen. All right, Tracy, it looks like we've probably got most of the responses. So what I see here, obviously obviously safety seems to be the very top answer. So we have about 54% of the attendees tonight had indicated that that is of importance to them. Then we also have a couple of responses that are a little bit more closer together. So we have sidewalk improvements with about 43% of respondents indicating that's important to them. We have historical features with about 41%, indicating that that's important. Traffic calming also at 41%. And then we look at features such as parking, event space at 24%, street furniture at 22%, transit at 16%, and green spaces in there as well as 35%. So thank you for that. We will be using, again, this feedback as we are starting to develop the concepts. And we are going to dive a little bit deeper into some of these particular points. And again, we'll have other polls and opportunities to ask questions as we move along. So I'll hand it over to Sarah, who's going to speak to some of the design features.
Thanks, Christy. So these are design features and best practices that have been pulled from the background study reports, as Christy was mentioning. So the first design features we will look at are related to pedestrian safety and accessibility. So as sidewalks are the primary way for pedestrians to travel along the street, those areas should be a key focus for the project, as well as looking at paving treatments for the spaces between the sidewalks and the curbs. As you may have noticed, the materials that currently exist along Brock Street vary quite significantly along the length of the area. We will also be considering the use of curb extensions or bump outs at key intersections, as these help to improve pedestrian visibility and shorten crossing distances. And we'll also be considering the use of pedestrian aids, such as indicator push buttons and walk countdown timers at major intersections. Next slide. I'll hand this one over to Nair.
Yeah, that's one of the traffic calming measures we're considering is reducing the number of traffic lanes, specifically the sections between Mary Street, where we have the Whitby Clinic, and Maple Street, where we have the Tim Hortons. And then the section between Dunlop Street, where we have the Dillarama, and Burn Street, just south of Centennial Park. So yeah, reduction in the number of lanes from the existing 4-lane on those sections to potentially 3 or 2 lanes. For the 3-lane cross section, we would have basically 1 lane in each direction and a center lane, which serves as a 2-way left turn lane. Guess moving on to the next slide.
I think, Nair, actually, we have, we were gonna pause here a little bit and just see if there was any questions.
Questions, yeah.
Yeah, they had, there's a couple questions in the chat. Maybe we can pause on this. And Tracy, I see we have one related to, I think it's actually bike lanes was the first comment, are bike lanes planned for? So bike lanes are part of our overall transportation plan. And I'm wondering, Tara, if you're able to maybe provide a little bit of background in terms of bike lanes and kind of some of the routes and areas that we have identified in the downtown area for bike lanes.
Sure. Thanks, Christy. As Christy mentioned earlier, our active transportation plan, which looks at cycling and pedestrian connectivity and trails throughout all of the town, does look at the downtown as well. We've identified on-road cycling or multi-use paths for the most part, not specifically through the downtown, but around the downtown. We've identified Henry Street for the north-south corridor, as well as Hickory. And then east-west, we have Mary Street has on-road cycling, and Dunlop Street and Colburn Street will be looking at either on-road cycling or multi-use paths as well. So we have identified that in the active transportation plan. This study would build on that, but would also look at other opportunities along this corridor that may not have been considered through the active plan.
Thanks, Tara. I see we have another question in here related to transit. So with transit, any way to have a median to safely get on and off transit? I'm not sure if Nair or Tara may be able to respond to that. And any thoughts on that?
I think this could be an option for the Dundas, BRT, bus rapid transit, where the coordination needs to be completed with the team, Metrolinx team. But yeah, potentially there could be a median there, since it's a center running bus. And along Brock Street, I guess since they're curb running, I don't see it as a feasible option, but we could definitely take a look at that. The plan is basically, with the traffic calming measures that I just discussed on this slide, reducing the number of lanes and increasing, reassigning that space for active transportation users, is to reduce the crossing distance for pedestrians, right? So I think that in a way that would take care of the safety concerns.
Great, thank you. I also see a question here from Councillor Lundquist. Question: if we reduce lanes, where is the likely diversion point for traffic? Tara, maybe you can speak to a little bit about what's required if you're looking at reducing any kind of traffic lanes.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Christy. Through this study, when we are looking at reducing lanes and two single northbound and a single southbound lane, as well as a center turn lane, which allows for turning movements to the side streets and the businesses, we do have to consider where that extra lane of traffic is going to go. So we will be looking at some traffic diversion and some modeling exercises to understand not only where the traffic is going to go, but will that diverted traffic trigger improvements on other roads, such as signalization or new stop control or turning lanes. So that is part of the study, to look at where the traffic goes and what that might mean for the rest of the network.
Okay, and I see we have another question from Bob. What would the level of service be with the reduced travel lanes compared to an existing level of service? Not sure, Tara or Nair, if you're able to answer that either.
Yeah, I can speak quickly to that.
Right.
The study was completed, I believe Transportation and Pedestrian Safety Action Plan looked into that reduction of a number of lanes and what the level of service would be. Mainly, they were all acceptable in terms of, usually we plan for a level of service D or E. So mainly they were still acceptable. The only intersection was Burns Street and Brock Street, where we saw couple of movements over capacity. We haven't done this assessment as part of this project yet, but yeah, I think the study showed only Burns Street and Brock Street having some operational issues. And speaking of Burns Street, we're going to look in the following slide. We're going to discuss, once we get there, we're going to discuss some of the options we're considering at that intersection.
I see Derek's got a question on the bus route. I think, Derek, we're going to hold on to that. We do have a slide on that one in a little bit, so we will come back, loop back around to that. And I think, David, your question probably was also addressed through some of the conversation Tara was able to have. If not, please let me know or let us know. And then, Tim, thank you for responding there. So your question was around the map and whether the study corridor is going to go 1 block east or 1 block west of Dundas. So no, the corridor really is Brock Street. So these images that are up on the screen right now are really from property line to property line along that Brock Street corridor. And the elements within that public, what we call a public right of way. So it doesn't touch on the private businesses or the private properties. It really is along that public space or public right of way in that area. So thank you for that clarification. And I'm going to pause to here. We have another poll. I see there's a couple more questions on Metrolinx as well. So we're going to bring up the second poll here that we have. So we are asking, are there specific areas along Brock Street where pedestrian safety could be improved? So we've kind of, again, broken it down into some of the zones. And if there is a particular area that you are concerned about or have some thoughts on, the second part there asks you to elaborate on any specific answers or comments that you may have. So just give that another maybe about a minute.
Responses seem to have slowed, so I'm just going to end the poll here. Not quite yet. Good.
So Tracy, has the poll closed?
Yep. I
Okay.
should be sharing the results right now.
Perfect. I won't be, I think you'll have to maybe elaborate on some of the responses as part of question 2 there. But from the first question, we can obviously that the Mary Street to Dundas Street seems to have 50%, 52% of some concerns in terms of pedestrian safety areas. That would then be kind of tied by the Dundas to Gilbert and Gilbert to Burns, and then that CP rail corridor to Mary Street. So Tracy, maybe if there's, if you're able to provide any kind of additional feedback or themes maybe that are coming out or responses.
Sure. So some of the common responses include that some of the sidewalk areas are broken and that there's a risk for tripping hazards. The crosswalks, there is a long stretch without any lights to cross, so having that as a major concern. Having events in the park where there's a increase in the volume of people, which might be potentially hazardous. Considering where exactly we're creating pedestrian zones. Concern for street parking, which we will be addressing in some upcoming slides. And then having mostly safe places to cross the street.
Yeah, and I know we're going to be actually touching on that on the next slide. We do have some thoughts about where we can look at pedestrian crossings or additional pedestrian crossings. There's, really good feedback. There's definitely in that area, obviously, between Burns and I believe it's Dunlop Street, where it is a fairly long stretch where there isn't a safe crossing route. So we have some thoughts about that and a few other areas. So thank you for that feedback. Again, we're going to take all of that into consideration. We do know, obviously, in the historic commercial core along Brock Street, the streetscape features in that area are with the brick paver stones that are there and some of the trees. It is a little bit bumpier. Some of the trees have pushed up the brick paver. So that is definitely part of this study and looking at how we can make that space more pedestrian friendly and accessible so there's not tripping hazards. If there is something specific that needs to be addressed immediately, obviously, please let us know and we can have our operations staff go out and take a look at that. So, all right, I'm going to pass it back to Nair, and I think we're going to go to the next slide, which is a few more intersection safety features.
Yep. So we're considering roundabout implementation of a roundabout at the intersection of Brock Street and Burn Street. Again, that's in the intersection just south of Centennial Park. A roundabout would help manage traffic, like create a traffic calming impact, and create a welcoming entrance to the downtown. One other look, and I guess that's been brought up the pole, like providing protected pedestrian crossings along the corridor. We're considering those at few locations along the corridor, namely St. Lawrence Street. St. Lawrence to the southeast provides access to Sarah William Stephenson Public School and Kids Safety Village. Currently, the distance between the nearest controlled pedestrian crossing to the south is Consumers Drive, and to the north is Burns Street, and the distance between those two intersections is around 500 meters. Typically, we would consider a controlled pedestrian crossing when the distance just exceeds 200 meters. So that meets the criteria, among other criteria as well. So that's why it's a location of consideration for a controlled pedestrian crossing. Another one is Trent Street. On the west end of Trent Street, there's the Henry Street High School. And then on the east end, there's Peel Park. Again, the nearest controlled pedestrian crossing to the south is Burns, and to the north is Gilbert Street. Gilbert Street is where we have on the west side the Freshco Plaza, and on the east side the Shell gas station. Again, the distance between those two controlled pedestrian crossing is 600 meters. So somewhere in between at that Trent intersection is a good candidate for a controlled pedestrian crossing. And then to the north is Walnut Street, where we have another candidate there. On Walnut, we have Kinsman Park and Coronation Park, and Walnut Street Junior School. Again, the distance between the nearest controlled pedestrian crossing is around 550 meters from the south to the north. So yeah, those are the locations we're considering controlled pedestrian crossing at. I believe you have a poll here. Yeah, please let us know if we should consider a roundabout at Brock and Burns, and please explain why or why not.
So as this poll is up, we do have a question about how does a pedestrian cross at the roundabout?
So there will be the standard pavement marking and signage will be implemented. I believe there will be flashing beacons and side-mounted signage. Tara, did I miss anything else from the town's standards for pedestrian crossings at roundabouts?
No, we install pedestrian crossovers with the signage and the rectangular rapid flashing beacons at our roundabouts, or we haven't yet, but in our new roundabouts, that will be the standard. And the benefit of a roundabout and pedestrians is they only have to look in one direction for oncoming traffic. And then there is a splitter island in the middle of the lanes that allows for pedestrian refuge as well.
You just give this another little bit, because I think the explain why or why not might take people maybe a bit to type out. So we'll just, I don't know if there was any other questions, Tracy, in the chat on the roundabouts, or. I think there is right now.
Not roundabout specific, but there was a question about what considerations have been made for projects intersecting Brock Street, for example, the alteration to Dundas, Mary Street improvements, and proposed traffic calming elsewhere.
So maybe I can start with that, and maybe Tara might be able to respond. So obviously, I think the Dundas Street stuff you're referring to is the BRT, which again, we will get to that in a future slide, but obviously we are going to be looking at other improvements or future improvements to that streetscape and how it intersects with Brock Street. And I know maybe I can pass the Mary Street one over to Tara.
Yeah. Part of what we're looking at for along this corridor, this will set a foundation for some of the side streets as well, for street furniture and how the corridor looks. For Mary Street specifically, we are looking at on-road cycling along that corridor. But when we're looking at, boulevard treatments, we will take direction from the Brock Street plan so that they do tie in well together. So this will set the foundation for future projects and other side streets.
Thanks, Tara. How are we doing, Tracy? Do you think we can close it, or we still have answers coming in? Okay. So thanks again for providing this input. And again, all this input and all your comments are being used, and we'll be using this as we go forward for the next phase. So from what I see, we've got about 63% have indicated that they are supportive, or we should consider, I guess, a roundabout at Brock and Burns Street. And then we had 38% had indicated no. And Tracy, maybe there's a couple of responses as to the why or why not that we can go through.
Sure. So in favor of why, some comments included that it looks pretty, that it would be a great way to calm traffic and create a way to slow down traffic in the area. It would also cause people to pay more attention, which was a positive. Some reasons why not that were identified. A few people mentioned a number of collisions, potentially. There's also a question about a pedestrian crossing would certainly lead to rear end collisions. Does anyone want to speak to that?
I can speak to that. Roundabouts are fairly new to Whitby, but we are seeing them pop up more and more, particularly as we expand in Brooklyn and our West Whitby area. They are great for calming traffic. You do have to watch for pedestrians the same as you would at any other intersection. We will have the rectangular rapid flashing beacons. So pedestrians will push the buttons, the beacon will flash. So that is the visual cue for drivers. And then with the slower speeds, any collisions that might happen are at a much lower speed and much less likely to cause injury.
Great. Is there anything else, Tracy, to highlight, or have we summarized everything? Okay. I'm just looking in the Q&A too, just to see. I think we've dealt with David's how the Brock Street roundabout deal with pedestrian traffic. So I think Tara's been able to speak to that. There is a question, I might go to this one from Susan. Are bikes allowed on sidewalks in Whitby? I see them all the time on Brock Street. This is another reason why sidewalks are not safe for pedestrians, since we're on pedestrian safety still. So maybe Tara, you might want to field that one.
Yeah, thanks, Christy. Cyclists aren't allowed on sidewalks in Whitby. Through the Highway Traffic Act, they are considered vehicles. We do see it often though, so that is why we do want to provide the cycling infrastructure. A lot of times cyclists are on sidewalks because they feel there are no other options available. So we are looking at providing those options for the cyclists, but no, they should not be on sidewalks.
Thanks, Tara. And before we do leave this, I saw there was a question from David on how are we dealing with commercial traffic. So Nair, I wonder if you want to respond to that one.
Yeah, again, the background study, Transportation and Pedestrian Safety Action Plan, looked at that, and although the plan is not to prohibit commercial traffic on Brock Street, a reduction in number of lanes will discourage commercial traffic from using Brock Street. And it looked at parallel major corridors to the east and west. And to the east, we have Garden Street, which that section of Garden Street has 4 lanes, 2 lanes in each direction, and was deemed to have reserve capacity to accommodate the commercial traffic that would be diverted from Brock Street.
Thanks, Nair. I do see another one did pop up about if a roundabout was to happen, would it not slow down passengers going to the train station?
I think one of the pros that someone had answered in the poll was that a roundabout will slow down traffic. So yeah, it is a much slower traffic control at that intersection. They're typically posted about 30 kilometers per hour. So that does potentially slow down traffic going through the corridor, but that's certainly what we're looking at achieving.
Great, thanks, Tara. All right, I think a few of the other questions I see, we're going to get to those in a few other slides. So I'm just going to pause maybe on the questions. We can come back to traffic. I know obviously it is a hot topic, so we're happy to come back and circle back to it, no problem. I'm going to move us forward, I think, onto some of the design features. So first one we're going to speak to a little bit is about lighting. So obviously we want to make sure that we have pedestrian scaled lighting that can not only improve, the visibility and safety for those walking in the area, but also it does enhance that nighttime ambience along the corridor. So the two images on the left and in the middle show kind of the current light standard poles, the historic looking poles that we do have right in the commercial corridor along Brock Street. And the image on the right-hand side shows where we start to kind of the bookends of the corridor from, Dunlop South or Mary North, we get back into the overhead hydro wires. So this study is also going to look at what the costing and or options would be to consider burying those hydro cables underground. Not only does this help to, provide a more aesthetic street, but it is more inviting, and it also allows for tree growth and a number of different elements. So we are, really considering how we can support and enhance. The image also on the left, we have those snowflake lights that are in the downtown during the holiday season. And we are looking at implementing a year-round, what we call light topper or seasonal type decoration that would help again to provide more lighting in the historic commercial core of downtown Whitby, both along Brock Street as well as along Dundas Street. So I'm going to move into street furniture. Just double checking the polls here. Questions? So a couple things with street furniture. We do have kind of that standard black bench that you probably have seen, or hopefully you've had a chance to enjoy sitting on in downtown Whitby. And we want to look at how we can create more opportunities to install benches as well as other types of rest stops for pedestrians. They help to offer visitors a comfortable place to take a break and also just sit and enjoy the surroundings. So this is an existing space that we have, the former Chamber of Commerce building right along Brock Street there. So I think we're going to bring a poll up here. I'm going to pause, and we would like to see if you have any thoughts on where you would like to see more benches in and around that Brock Street corridor.
So while people are answering, there was a question, is there any plan or consideration for public art or artist design furniture or fixtures?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I did present actually at the Heritage Advisory Committee meeting last night, and the same idea came up at that meeting, which I thought was really interesting. How can we look at, say, for example, a bike rack and trying to implement, it as more historic features or unique Whitby identity. And so I think this study will definitely consider that. There's lots of opportunity. We just approved a public art policy for the town, and we do have quite a number of great public art murals and some statues and sculptures in downtown Whitby already. And we want to make sure that public art can be incorporated along this whole corridor as we look at design and where best locations can be. So really happy to see that.
Another good question is, are there any ways to discourage vagrancy around street furnitures without relying on hostile architecture?
Maybe I'll pass this to Sarah.
I think that's something we would look at for sure as we're developing that. I don't have any immediate answers off the top of my head, but
I think the one thing that I hear from people often is the type of street furniture needs to be kind of warm, inviting. And I think we need to make sure we're looking at all user groups within our downtown area. So we started to try and implement things like when we do the patios, the Muskoka chairs are a different type of street furniture that we have there, as well as some of the picnic tables that we've got along Brock Street as well. So we want to look at all different types of seating options, but we are cognizant of making sure we're able to support all user groups within our community as well. So how's the poll going there, Tracy? Do we want to see what responses we have?
That's good. We have 22 responses so far. And we have a lot of good responses. So some ones identified were the core downtown between Mary and Dunlop, between Burns and Gilbert could use more benches for seniors who walk uptown, outdoor seating around cafes, along the museum, near bus stops, around the Brock and Dundas area, and having benches and tables set up outside. So year round, as opposed to just the patios occupying traffic lanes during summer.
That's great. Thank you, everyone, for that feedback. Again, I think good suggestions, recommendations, and we want to, again, make sure it's the whole corridor and not just focused on the historic commercial part, but people walk into that space from all different areas in our community. So we want to make sure we're providing rest stops, and we have spaces like our 55 plus facility kind of in the southern end. So we want to make sure there's opportunities for people that are maybe using that facility if they want to walk downtown for lunch. There's an opportunity for them to rest as well. So thank you for all those suggestions. The second item here is obviously garbage and recycling. So we have currently that 2-tier system bin that you see in the image in the middle there. And I believe we purchased those in about 2012. They're almost kind of at their lifespan in a way, but we do have a number of them throughout the whole study corridor, with probably some more focused right in, again, the historic commercial core around the Four Corners area at Brock and Dundas streets. So obviously we want to make sure that this study looks at the number of garbage cans that we have, and that they are placed appropriately and in logical locations, and that it helps to, again, keep our downtown tidy and clean. So another poll that we just wanted, again, some feedback from the group here is, where would you like to see garbage and recycling bins throughout that study corridor? So if you have suggestions, maybe you've been downtown and you're, walking or you're going to a bus stop or something along that nature, and you've identified that it'd be great to have a garbage can here, or maybe there's areas where you see a bit more garbage that tends to pile up. So we're kind of trying to get some more input on where you would like to see those types of recycling and garbage cans. And I'll just give this a second because I know it takes a little bit of time to think about it as you're thinking about the downtown area. The other thing that I was going to maybe highlight too is I know graffiti has come up at a number of different, when I talk with either business owners or users in downtown Whitby, and often the garbage containers do get tagged with graffiti. So our operations staff have gone out and are cleaning, removing them, trying to clean and power wash them as much as they can. We have purchased a few more just to try and replace the ones that are not able to be cleaned up. But if there is graffiti that you do see in the downtown on kind of public elements like garbage cans or parking meters, I know often sometimes get tagged. We're happy if you want to let us know, and we're happy to have staff go out and try and clean it up as well, because those tend to be some of the areas that do get tagged a little bit in downtown. Tracy, are we able to maybe speak to some of the responses that are coming in?
So some common ones so far are at bus stops, by restaurants, and then having garbage cans in great locations. We're doing a great job, which is exciting. along Maple and Brock near the Tim Hortons or anywhere near where food is served or where people tend to gather, so near benches and in parks and close to businesses. Specific street includes on Mary Street between Byron and Hickory. More at the south end near Melly's and the museum. In the plazas where Dollarama and Freshco are located. Having a weekly collection so that, especially in the historic areas, so that they can move garbage off of Brock into back alleys. Near transit stops. And general consensus of more.
Perfect. Thank you for that. So the last item on this slide is what we call seasonal decorations or other types of decorations in downtown Whitby. So you can see from that image on the right there, we have implemented the banner program. So that aligns with our new Whitby branded logo and banners. We have flower baskets that are maintained and organized by our Downtown Whitby Business Improvement Area, BIA. And in the winter, again, you saw the image of the snowflake as a seasonal decoration, and the BIA also does the garlands, wraps the poles with garlands and lights. So part of this program too will look at how we can do other types of decorations in our downtown to help enhance that space. So now I'm going to pass it to Sarah, and she's going to speak a little bit about green space. And I know there was a few questions in the chat about this as well. So
Sure. So as part of this project, we will be looking at opportunities for planting more trees along Brock Street, as well as protecting existing healthy mature trees will be important. Trees really do provide a lot of benefits, some of which include beautification of the space, as well as providing shade. Another way of incorporating green space into the streetscape is through the use of planters. This could include these smaller planters, as you can see in the central image, which currently exist in downtown, that can contain colorful annual material that would be replanted each spring. Or we could also look at something like the larger planters you see in the image on the right, raised planters that could support things like smaller trees, shrubs, or perennial material. And if we place planters along the street edge, this helps to create a more inviting atmosphere for pedestrians and vehicles. Do we have a question?
Yeah, I think there's a few in the chat, Sarah. We had one on, I see here about trees. Sorry, I just lost it. My apologies. A few more questions coming in.
We had does the design of the sidewalks keep the existing mature trees?
That would be the intention. If it's a healthy, mature tree, that would have, yeah, we would be taking that into account as we plan where the sidewalks would be located or what kind of construction would happen. You really need to minimize any disturbance within the root zone. So there may need to be special construction practices that would happen within those zones. But definitely we want to protect any healthy trees that are currently existing.
Yeah, I think that's a really unique feature in downtown Whitby. You don't see too many main streets or downtowns that have the mature tree canopy that we do. And I know it provides shade for users of that space, which is obviously important for that pedestrian element. So we are, cognizant of the honey locust trees that we do especially have right in the historic core, as well as some of the other mature trees on the other edges. And there was another question here I saw about what consideration is being given to sustainable design. Sarah, maybe you can respond to some of those ideas.
Sure. I mean, those ideas will be developed further as we move into concept design, but definitely we will be considering things like trees, as we mentioned, for providing shade, as we look at different types of paving materials, things that could be permeable to allow for stormwater infiltration, or lighter colored materials that help to reflect sunlight and not to increase the urban heat island effect.
Yeah, one of the other things that the town is doing is right in front of the new station number 3 development along Brock Street. We're using soil cell technology, which is the first for the town of Whitby. So we've been able to work with Brookfield, who's the developer there. And this is really a design feature that allows for a larger soil base underneath the sidewalk. So it helps the trees grow better, healthier, larger tree canopy. And we want to make sure that, when that gets installed, our operations staff are also coming down, taking a look at what's underground. So we have an understanding of the elements and the features that are part of that technology. So we can look at how we can use that in other parts of the streetscape as we consider this study. There's a question here about what kinds of trees would be used for new plantings. Urban trees are notorious for short lifespans given their inability to properly root and exposure to pollutants. So I think we've looked at, and Sarah, I can start now, maybe pass it to you if there's something I missed, but downtown Whitby is very traditional with sugar maples, especially in our historic neighborhoods in and around that area. So sugar maples, and we obviously want to make sure we're planting any kind of native trees that are native to Southern Ontario and to this region. We're really cognizant of that tree species and making sure that we look at a variety of different types of trees too, because if there is other infestations like we had with the emerald ash borer, we don't want to be cutting down whole sections of trees. So making sure we're looking at how we can disperse different types of trees and different species of trees along the corridor. And I don't know, is there anything else on trees? Oh, I have one here. If the town cuts down trees on burns, will they be replacing them? So obviously, yeah, any trees that we look at, we do have a replacement policy at the town. So we do look at making sure we're planting other types of trees with any kind of, whether it's either a private development or a town tree that maybe has been damaged or had to be removed as part of a storm or something of that nature. So we would definitely be looking at how we can enhance and further support that mature tree canopy in our downtown area.
One last question would be, if reducing lanes, would there be an opportunity to create boulevards with plants in the middle of the street?
Go ahead, Tara.
I can take that one.
Yeah.
It's something that we can certainly take into consideration. I think one of the features that we want to look at along this corridor is the ability to provide a center left turn lane to support not only all of those side streets, but a lot of the businesses along the corridor have individual driveways. So having that center left turn lane will support those uses and those movements. But a planted median is something that we can consider either along the corridor or just at specific locations.
Maybe we can, Tracy, maybe, yeah, perfect, thanks.
Okay. So a common theme that emerged through our background study review was the importance of promoting and enhancing historic features within the downtown. There are several historical features that exist within the Brock Street study area, including the Lind House Museum. So there's an opportunity through this project to highlight the museum property, making it more accessible and inviting to visitors. Also, a portion of the Warden's Plan Heritage District falls within the Brock Street area. So it'll be important to respect and distinguish the heritage elements of the district, including architecture, landscaping, and streetscaping. The image on the right is taken from the town's Downtown Historic Gateway Report, which recommends establishing distinctive gateway features at key intersections along Brock Street to make it a more welcoming and beautiful entrance to the downtown.
So one of the other areas that we know is important to the community and to the businesses is creating great opportunities to support events in our downtown area and specifically along Brock Street. So these can be, the street can be, looked at in a number of different ways. One thing is what we call flexible street design. So that could include such things as a rolled curb for some portions of Brock Street. And that really allows for a real seamless space between the sidewalks and the road. So it creates a real pedestrian environment and accessible space. So that could be something that could be looked at as part of this study. Other things could be boulevard bullards that maybe come out of the ground so you can close off a street very easily. I know some municipalities have looked at that in their historic areas as well. So we are really cognizant that we do want to bring, events to downtown Whitby. Our business improvement area is also eager to support events in our downtown space as well. So we do have another poll with this one as well. And we are just getting some feedback in terms of what types of events you would like to see in this area. So we have a couple of ideas, and Tracy can throw the poll up. And I see, well, Tracy's maybe working on that. I do see a comment or a question here about consideration of free public Wi-Fi for this outdoor space could be great to extend people use. Yeah, that was actually another action item as part of the Downtown Whitby Action Plan, was to look at how we can incorporate Wi-Fi. The town has had different discussions and meetings with different service providers, you know, options of putting them on light posts or other town-owned spaces in the downtown. So we want to look at how we can possibly incorporate Wi-Fi. Again, that helps to drive some of the traffic and people into our downtown as well. So Tracy, I'm just wondering, is there, I haven't seen the poll come up. I don't know if there's.
Having some technical challenges with it at the moment.
Okay. Maybe if people want to put, if there's any thoughts, I can also speak to the fact that we just had a events survey that was just launched probably about a month and a half ago. It just closed recently. And one of the questions was looking at a new signature event for the town of Whitby. So we are looking at a new signature event to come back to Whitby in 2025. And we have, so far, the feedback that we've received to date is that people would like to see another signature or large scale event in downtown Whitby. And there's lots of opportunities for the town to work with many community partners, such as our business improvement area, the Legion, the Whitby Public Library, or other service groups that we have in and around the community. So we're really wanting to help, you know, work with different groups and see what we can do to bring back that vibe and that feeling that we have. You know, events do provide a sense of community. They help support economic development for the businesses, and they act as like a tourism draw for the community. So maybe, Tracy, if we're having difficulties, we can move forward. And if there is thoughts or questions people have about the types of events we'd like to see or they'd like to see in the downtown, we're happy to have that in the chat or sorry, in the question and answer field there. Okay, so maybe we can move on to the next slide, which is some transit considerations, and I'll pass it back to Nair.
Thanks, Christy. Yeah, we're considering implementing bus shelters at key locations along the corridor. Mainly the locations are Brock and Gilbert Street intersection, where the Fresco Plaza is, Brock and Trent Street, and Brock and Maple Street, where the Tim Hortons is. And along with that, we're considering also the bike racks, which would go along with that. So yeah, again, we'll coordinate with Durham Region Transits since they operate the transit lines there. But yeah, those are the locations that we've identified as potential candidates for bus shelters. All right, do we want to move forward or want to pull up? All right, yeah, so this image here shows the rendered image from the Dundas bus rapid transit study. This is the section on Dundas Street between Brock Street and Byron Street to the west. And this is the views looking east towards Brock Street. So we will be coordinating with the team working on this project, and specifically at the intersection of Dundas Street and Brock Street, where the designs need to be coordinated and aligned. But here it's showing center running BRT in the eastbound direction and one traffic lane, a general purpose traffic lane in each direction.
So I know we did have a few questions. We said we're going to loop back around to them. So there was one from Derek at the beginning there. What happens to this idea of the dedicated, if the dedicated bus route proceeds? So AECOM, as Nair's indicated, has been given the information that we've received from Metrolinx as part of the study area. So they've looked at obviously that specifically the Brock and Dundas Street intersection, and how this particular proposal, how we can make sure the work aligns and or that we're not under doing competing interests. The timelines that we have, I'm gonna maybe ask Tara just to speak to kind of where they're at and what we've heard from them recently.
Thanks, Christy. So Metrolinx has gone through their overall planning study, which did get approval. They are working on their business design case right now. So the funding and the timing is still unknown, and as well, the construction is still unknown. So our understanding is that they will be constructing in sections when they do move forward with construction. Right now, we expect them to be moving from the west to the east. And through their design concepts, the town will be working with Metrolinx and Durham Region to provide input to those designs. We haven't seen anything further for the downtown core. So there's still a lot of unknowns, which I know that's not a great answer for a meeting and planning for our downtown. But until we hear back from Metrolinx, which we hope should be summer, fall, when their business case is done. Right now, what we have to go on is what they showed to the public in the town a couple of years ago now.
Thanks, Tara. I see, I think, Tracy, we've dealt with the questions on BRT. Unless there's anything else, we can again loop back to this at the end. I know, like I mentioned, we want to make sure our study, the town study for Brock Street, aligns, and timing for construction. We're going to take, all those types of factors into consideration. We don't want to be putting something in and then having Metrolinx come in and rip anything up. That's obviously not sustainable business practice. So we want to make sure that we're aligning anything with them and that we have the most up-to-date and recent information from them as we continue to move the study along. But we're also cognizant that we do need to make improvements along our Brock Street corridor that the town does have ownership of. And we want to make sure that those improvements meet a lot of the different objectives that we're talking about here this evening as well. I'm going to just pause here too, because there was a couple questions on a few of the past slides that I wanted to maybe address before we move to the next one. I had a question about any consideration given to interpretive panels on Whitby's history along the corridor. That's a really great suggestion, Chris. Definitely appreciate that. We do have some historic plaques. You probably may have seen them. They're the blue plaques that are kind of scattered throughout all of downtown Whitby, but I love the idea of interpretive panels. At our Heritage Committee meeting last night, there also was comments even about our Indigenous history and how we can incorporate that as part of our history along that streetscape. So thank you for that suggestion. We also have one here, if Perry's plan is designated a heritage district, will it be given the same consideration for design features? So for those that may not know, between Perry's plan and Worden's plan is south of Dundas Street, kind of the southwest quadrant. So that neighborhood in behind the library. And then Perry's plan is on the north side of Dundas Street, northwest quadrant of Dundas. So there's another historic residential neighborhood in that area as well. So yes, we will be obviously making sure that anything that we look at is complementary and will align with kind of the whole character of the downtown as well. I think there was just a comment, the Santa Claus Parade was a big success that I believe is still planning to continue. And it is a route that goes from Manning, just north of the railway there to Trent Street in downtown. So we work with that third-party group to make sure that event is successful as much as we can, and obviously working with the businesses to let them know about the road closures and things. There was a comment about the bus shelter, any way of getting lights in the shelter. I think that's a really great suggestion. We can definitely bring that back to Durham Region Transit as they manage those features. And there was another one, can the bus shelters have a unique heritage look? Again, another great suggestion. This was also something raised at the Heritage Committee meeting last night. We need to again talk to Durham Region Transit as part of the next phase of this study to see what other options for bus shelters there are, or do they have different types or different styles of bus shelters, or how we can incorporate more of that historic feeling and flair that we know is important in downtown Whitby. We also have a question here. Can we remove the light poles on the northeast corner of the Four Corners? So I believe that's the space in front of the CIBC. So again, that was a project that was implemented a number of years ago now, and this study will definitely look at that intersection, really that whole kind of corner. Mostly there's what we call that pork chop, or that little pedestrian landing pad there. We need to make sure that it's not only safe for pedestrians, but that vehicles can turn there. So we can definitely take that feedback again into this. We also have cultural festivals events should be considered. Thank you for that. And then is there an ability to add design to the CP rail bridge as the entryway to downtown, or is this controlled by CP? So we have had conversations with the railway companies, both CN and CP, in our community. We know often that bridge it's another area that often gets tagged with graffiti. And if we do see it, we have that connection, we let them know. And usually they're pretty good at going out and removing or painting over the graffiti. My understanding with working with the railway companies, we looked at actually the Thixon Road Bridge at one point to try and look at either painting the walls to create a mural or some kind of public art. And there's a lot of concerns from the railway company. It's very highly regulated area in a space, and they're concerned a little bit about any kind of paint being used in a larger fashion that way that could impact the structural integrity of the bridge. So we have explored it in the past, and we're happy to, again, further that dialogue with them to see if there's options as part of this, because it is kind of that gateway feature into our downtown core for sure. I'm just going through a couple more here. Is there any way we can have Metrolinx come and chat with us once the plans are finalized? So we do know that Metrolinx often sets up a booth at our Whitby Public Library. I know Tara has reached out to them to also see if they could attend an active transportation committee meeting. It's an advisory committee of the town. So we are hopeful that they will come. We'll continue to, again, try and reach out to them to see if we can have them come back and provide more updated information for us. So I also see considerations being given to solar and or wind generated power to supplement power to lighting. Another great idea. I don't know, Sarah, if you have any comments on that particular item or any thoughts on it.
I mean, there are streetlight products that do have solar panel capabilities, but I guess that would be we'd need to consult with the town operations and to see how that could be incorporated. It definitely is possible.
Thanks. So I might move to the next slide. I see a couple more questions. I'm going to maybe move, and then we'll go to these last few questions here as well. And there's still, again, lots of time. It's just like cognizant of our time here, 8:07. So parking, obviously we know parking it's usually another #1 topic that we hear about a lot in our downtown area. And we're very cognizant of making sure that we're providing great parking and on-street parking opportunities for businesses as well as customers or user groups that are coming into downtown Whitby. So this study is going to look at opportunities to support on-street parking spaces on both sides of Brock Street. As well, we're very cognizant of looking at providing accessible parking spaces. I believe that we do not currently have any accessible parking spaces along Brock Street. We have them on Byron Street by the Legion, as well as on Elm Street on the south side there. So we're very cognizant of, again, making sure we're looking at how we can incorporate accessible parking on both sides of the road, as well as on the north and the south side of Dundas Street, so that all different user groups are able to access businesses and the downtown area easily. So the other thing too is we have looked at in the past number of years, basically, I think since COVID, we've considered on-street patios, and we've installed a few of them along the Brock Street corridor. This top right image here is showing the one on Brock Street South. So we have a couple of different styles. This one here is the public, what we call a public patio space. So it's open to anyone. It's not specific to one business, but it really is that public space. We have Muskoka chairs. Brock Street Espresso brings those little tables in and out, and we have some picnic tables. And this is a seasonal patio, so it usually goes up right before the May long weekend, and then we usually take it down, usually depending on the weather, kind of the end of September. We also have the other style, which you've probably seen, which are in front of actual restaurants. So for example, KB or the Vault 8-Bit Beans has patios that are directly in front of their business. So the patio space is on the sidewalk, and then the walkway around the patio is along the on-street parking spaces. So I know there's some comments and concerns from businesses about removing on-street parking, but also many comments from the general public that they really enjoy these spaces. So we do want some feedback tonight from this group here to see about consideration of converting some of those on-street parking spaces for patios for local businesses. So we do have another poll that has just been launched. And the first question is, do you support the on-street patio program along Brock Street? Yes or no? And then the second question is, what are your thoughts on removing parking spaces for patios? So if there's specific concerns or comments, either for, or if you're maybe not in favor, we're happy to, again, take all that feedback in.
While we're waiting for results, there was a question, is there any way to lower curbs where accessible parking is?
I can take that one. Part of our design and part of our work plan for transportation services is to develop a parallel or on-street accessible parking standard. And that would look at lowering those curbs adjacent to the parking space. So once that design is complete, we will be looking at implementing those not only along Brock Street, but throughout the whole downtown.
I also see a question from Meg here about considerations to patios that are designed that don't require the construction pylons. Can we do patios behind businesses and clean up the alleyways? So thanks, Meg, for that question. We generally, we have to have, for safety purposes, a pylon kind of at either end to make sure that it's visible to people that are parking. We try and have put these patios on one end where there is a bit of a pedestrian bump out zone there. So it's really the other end. And we've gone back to the, black railing style that is more attractive in looking. So, and then the second part of your question is about, can we put patios in the back alleys and clean up alleyways? Yes, that's also on our radar as well. We've been working with some of the businesses in that area. For example, the Food and Art Cafe has a patio kind of in their back area that they've implemented. So those would be private patios. And we're always happy to support businesses that are looking to consider doing any kind of a private patio space. So if there's restaurants that are looking at that as well, and again, we have to make sure it works with the alleyway itself. But yeah, we're always looking at ways to try and encourage both sides, if we can, of the street frontages, the alley or the public facing street, to implement different types of ideas. So thanks for that comment. And we will circle back to the event poll. I saw that Tracy was able to get that up and running, so we'll circle back to that in a second.
I'm just gonna put an end to the parking one for now.
So again, looks like the majority of people, 91%, do support the on-street patio program along Brock Street. And about 9% said they do not. And maybe Tracy, you can speak to some of the extended responses, and it's part of question 2.
There was a sentiment not to remove parking spaces for patios. Others include better signage to direct drivers to parking lots that are currently available. Patios designed with construction fences and pylons aren't really in alignment. There should be public parking lots. Have the area be more pedestrian friendly seasonally and slowing down cars. So there was support for having pedestrian cycling friendly streets in the area. in favor of removing them. While on the other side, have it during spring and summer only to make it more flexible. And there was a favorable comment of having the patios is a great idea. It makes the downtown Whitby area more interesting and helps to reduce speed in the downtown area. So a mixed bag of comments.
Great. Thanks, Tracy. So that's really the end of the formal presentation deck that we have, but I do see there's a few more questions in the chat that we can get to. And if there's any other questions that or comments that people have that we have not addressed tonight, please again put them in the Q&A. So I'm going to maybe go back up to the top here, Tracy. So we have the first question being, how will this overall redevelopment plan impact small local businesses that give character to the area? So the goal really of this project is to make enhancements. So you can see in this image here with that we have a lot of different, competing interests in our downtown, and specifically, again, that historic commercial core around Brock and Dundas. So the image on the right where you see the patio, we have a very narrow streetscape, but we're trying to make improvements so that we can support businesses. We know businesses put a lot of time, energy, and investment as part of, a lot of it is small businesses and locally owned businesses in downtown Whitby. And so we want to make sure, as well as the other areas along the corridor, south as well as north. So we want to make sure we're doing improvements that help to make a positive and lasting impact and really spruce up the area. We know it's a little tired looking. There's a mixture of different types of materials in the area. So we really are trying to kind of make the area better. It helps to draw in more people when they feel the area is comfortable for them, when there's good lighting, when there's seating available. All these elements that we're talking about, we hope that will improve that commercial business experience for them. The second question I see here is, do these plans take into account the population growth of Whitby in the coming years? So yes, our ACOM team has definitely received all of that. We've also provided them a number of the different development applications that we have along this particular corridor so that we can ensure any future development will look at how we can incorporate streetscape enhancements or improvements that align with our Brock Street kind of vision that we have. So and another good question. Thank you for that. Maybe Tara, I'll pass this one to you. So any discussion about a bypass for heavy truck traffic?
Thanks, Christy. We haven't specifically discussed a heavy truck bypass per se. With the improvements, the traffic calming, the roundabouts, we would expect this to discourage truck movements. And I think Nair mentioned earlier, we would expect, heavy vehicles that come off the 401 would go up to Consumers and then over to Garden Street. Obviously, we do still have to plan for the ability for trucks through the downtown area. We have a lot of commercial developments that do rely on truck deliveries, so we do still have to be able to accommodate trucks. But the thought is that with the traffic calming, with the roundabouts, unless heavy vehicles have to be there, the environment will discourage them, and they'll be looking to go somewhere else. It'll just be easier for them to drive somewhere else rather than through the downtown.
Thanks, Tara. I see another question about building height been determined yet. So again, this study really is focused on kind of the public street, but I can answer that. The downtown Whitby secondary has a plan which incorporates our policies for height in and around the whole of downtown. It was approved by council, and I believe is just at the region. I think it's almost in the final approval stages there. But the recommended height considerations in the historic core is 3 stories along the street. And then the second half of the back half of that building can go up to 6 stories. So that was the maximum height in the historic commercial core for downtown. Can you please explain how you are going to restore and enhance the heritage of downtown through storefronts and signage? So again, this is really this focus of this study is the public street. We do have with signage, we do have a facade and sign grant program for businesses. So a number of businesses along Brock Street have taken part of that. If there is businesses on the webinar tonight and you are looking to do any upgrades to your signage, please feel free to reach out to me. We have grants available for up to $2,000 or 50% that helps to make improvements for storefronts. Some businesses put up signs and they may not comply with the sign bylaw per se. So we're trying to work with business owners by providing them a grant, an option to look at updating their business signage. We do have our summer students go out in the summer and they go to the different businesses where we know there possibly could be some improvements, or if say it's an older sign, for example, that could look at being restored, to try and have them provide information about this grant program available for them. Solar wind power for lights. Did we answer this one already? I think we might have, unless it's different. I think we might have answered that one. The event poll, yeah. So let's go back, maybe back to the event poll. Tracy will change it up here. You're able to get this one launched. So this is what events would you like to see in this area? So we have concerts, music events, food festivals, children's festivals, cultural events, or festive type events like a festival of lights. And then the second part, are there any other suggestions or other comments that you would like to see? So while we're maybe just doing that, I'm going to go back to just another question here and then for time. Is there any way for Ubers and taxis to pick up passengers behind businesses? Currently, it is very difficult for Ubers to pick up and drop off on Brock Street. I'm wondering, Tara, you might be able to respond to that one.
Certainly any comments related to pick up and drop off, we want to hear through this study. There have been some requests over the years for loading and unloading zones, which would function very similar for passengers as well. And Christy mentioned earlier, we are looking at whether we can clean up those back alleys and look at how those can be used better. But certainly if that's a desire of the community, that's certainly something that we can look at through this study, and whether we provide some of those pick up and drop off locations. The challenge, of course, is that if those spaces are being used for parking, then that does limit some of our ability to provide parking. But certainly that is something that we can look at.
Thanks, Tara. Great, Tracy, how are we doing on the poll? Do we want to maybe end the poll here? So lots of great responses. So I think food is that #1 driver. I know everyone loves a butter tart festival and apple pie fest or other types of food events. And that really does align with some of the actions that we're doing as part of our overall tourism strategy for the town. As probably many of you know, if you're in and around downtown or you've come downtown Whitby, we have lots of great food establishments. And just last year, we created an award-winning food guide that received a national award, because we are very cognizant of our foodies in Whitby, as well as all the great food establishments we have. So, and that I think also aligns a lot with some of the responses we got back from our larger events poll. Cultural events as well as festive events, again, are up there, and concerts, music, you know, that's, I think all of these things we're looking at considering how we can bring some of these ideas together to create different event spaces throughout the whole downtown and work with, again, our event partners. Maybe Tracy, some of the comments that are in the other section, if there's anything specific we want to highlight there.
Sure. Amongst other events, heritage events and art events were called out heavily. Busker Fest had a few mentions. Historic walks, Durham Pride to come to Whitby. local book shows and highlighting the library and book sales in that way, and the Santa Claus parade and block party.
Great. Thank you all. Again, I'll pass that on to our events team here for additional feedback as part of that. So appreciate all that input. Just again, I'm cognizant of time, so we've got a few more questions here. There's a question about the Bell building, and is it no longer used as a mechanical switches, no longer needed? There's actually a large Bell line that runs under that building and throughout the downtown area. So I think it is still quite well used. And you know, we can have discussions with them. They do have a great green space kind of on their lawn there. And I know there's been thoughts about, can we put some chairs or, you know, use that green space in a different way? So again, we're happy to help create some of that dialogue as part of this study to see how we can kind of enhance that space that's already there. And it has a really nice honey locust shade tree right in front of it as well. So Tara, I've got another one for you here about touching on how the Mary Street improvements intersect with the Brock Street improvements, if you can kind of speak to that a little bit further.
Yeah, absolutely. Our plans for Mary Street include on-street cycling, improving what's there now. It's an urban paved shoulder right now, and we were looking at enhancing that to a bike lane where possible. We are looking longer term in the future, whether we can provide a multi-use path along Mary Street. And then depending on what happens along the Brock Street corridor, that multi-use path would tie into the pedestrian infrastructure along Brock Street. And as well, whatever we do from a streetscape enhancement, we can pull that into the Mary Street corridor as we do improvements along there, just to tie in the two facilities.
Thanks, Tara. And to the respondent, if there is further questions, I'm happy to, you can send it my way. I'm happy to connect you directly with Tara as well, if you want to have a dialogue further than that. From Susan, is there a way to address broken windows at the sidewalk level? So again, this study is really that public right of way, but I do know that we have a member of our Durham Region Police Services that sits on our downtown Whitby Business Improvement Area board. And if there is concerns or if there is any challenges, we work very closely and directly with a lot of the businesses in downtown Whitby. The police do actually have, if you are a business owner in the downtown and you have a camera, there is a way to register your camera on their website. And I encourage businesses, if you're online, to get in touch with me and I can direct you to that form, because it does help to support them. We also did implement recently CCTV cameras along our street poles along Brock Street. So we have about 4 of them along Brock Street, and we've just recently updated 2 along Dundas Street in front of the library and another one at Hickory Street. So those have been helpful. I know with our police, they're owned by the town, but they're helpful with the police if there is incidents or crimes that are happening in our downtown to help support that. We have another question on portable garbage cans on Burn Street, as some people are dumping garbage on private property. Thank you for that suggestion. We can definitely look at that there. Liam's got a question on turning the sales office for station number 3 into a business. So, or infill in the gap on the east side of Brock Street for Hunt and Dagger. So thanks, Liam, for that. We are seeing what options. The town does own the building. It's actually in the image on the top right there across the street with the tree in front of it. The town does own that building, and we are looking at what opportunities once once Brookfield is out of that space, how we can adaptively reuse that building. So we're looking at that currently. And in terms of that gap just north of Hunt and Dagger, I've been in conversations with the property owner, and they have started some of the foundation work, and they're looking forward to trying to build this summer. They had paused over the winter just with the weather conditions and freeze and thaw and things like that. So they're looking at moving forward this spring, summer to try and look at a design that will be 3 stories in height, ground floor commercial with residential above. So very similar in style to what's existing. And they are the owner is someone that is very cognizant and appreciative of the heritage elements in downtown Whitby. Going forward, will there be any similar planning studies for Brock Street south of 401? Maybe I'll pass that to Tara again.
Thanks, Christy. We've had some initial conversations internally about Brock Street South. Currently, it is our Region of Durham road, but there have been conversations with the Region of Durham regarding road rationalization, where they would transfer their road to the town, or we would transfer a road to them. So Brock Street South is part of those road rationalization discussions. So when it is transferred to the town, we will be looking at that corridor as well.
Thanks, Tara. So I have another one here about the bank. So the CIBC Bank at the northeast corner of Brock and Dundas Street are leaving. Are there any plans for the town to acquire the property? So currently, Tim, there's no plans that I know of that the town's acquiring that property. I've actually just asked our economic development team to reach out to the CIBC Bank just to see how we can help with any conversations about potential new tenants or what the space, what interest they've had in that space, so we can kind of help guide some of those discussions or provide input as needed. And then Sean, I've got your note here. I'm just about to type that you can message me directly. My email here, maybe I can go to the last slide. Thank you, Tracy. My contact information there, downtowns@whitby.ca. So happy to message me directly on that. And then I'm able to pass that information along to our operations team, and we can have a, if you want, you can call me too. We can have a conversation about that. So making sure there's no other questions, I think, Tracy, and we're pretty much right on time here. So thank you, everyone. I do, again, really appreciate such valuable feedback as part of this project. We're really, I think, excited. I think, you know, as residents and business owners and property owners in Whitby, I think Brock Street really is that historic gateway into our community, and it also links us up to downtown Brooklyn. And we're really excited about the possibilities of what we can do with this street and creating that really high level kind of concept vision of what we can do to achieve a street that's, you know, walkable, pedestrian friendly, supports businesses, and all those different elements we talked about tonight. So if you haven't had a chance, we do have a project page. So it's connectwhitby.ca/Brock Street. And I encourage you to go on there because there is a survey on that project page. And I think I've got about 260, maybe more. I haven't checked today, but there's quite a lot of responses on there. So I'm really pleased with the results. And a lot of the comments we're getting tonight are aligning with the comments in the survey. So I think it's nice to see some of those trends that are happening. So we are accepting feedback on the survey until April 19th. So a couple more weeks. And if there is something, again, specific that's, you know, you'd like to just connect with me directly. I'm the downtown person. I work in the downtown and do a lot of help support the businesses community in our downtown. So I'm always happy to, if you're a business owner, happy to meet with you on site, or if you're a resident or a property owner, happy to have a conversation with you if you have other feedback. So I think it's just a couple more questions. I appreciate that, you know, present feedback that you've given us tonight. And with that, I think we'll close the meeting and look forward to coming back in the fall. Your information has been collected tonight, and we will keep you on our interested parties list so that you're aware of when these concept designs to come back in the fall. We'll be able to message you, and you can again come. It probably will be an in-person meeting where we can have some boards and some more design concepts that you can have a look at. So thank you again, everyone. Have a good evening.